What's up, Star Wars nerds, and welcome to another episode of Brett on Fett. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the brand new speederbike and scout trooper set for the vintage collection that's been hitting homes here in the US the past week or so. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 51 of Brett on Fett, and way back in Christmas of 1983 was one of the best Christmases of my childhood. I was 6 years old. We were coming fresh off of the debut of Return of the Jedi that previous summer, and that movie blew my mind. It's one of my earliest memories of seeing Star Wars in the theater. And of course, with that release meant all the toys from the movie were coming out. And so it was a big deal for that Christmas. And it was the first time I got a bunch of my own Star Wars toys. Before that, the only Star Wars toys I had to play with was actually my older brother's. And so I'd always have to sneak in his room and play with his Star Wars and his Empire Strikes Back figures. And so it was a big deal to get all these Return of the Jedi's toys, because these were finally my own Star Wars toys. And I just about got everything from Return of the Jedi for that Christmas. I got the Ewok Village, I got the Jabba the Hutt throne room, a ton of figures, and I also got the Scout Trooper, or the Biker Scout as we knew it back then, and the speederbike. And that thing was awesome. It was one of my favorite vehicles to play with, especially because it had a little button you press and it exploded. And the speederbike chase scene on Endor was one of my favorite scenes of the movie. So I was ecstatic to get the toy version of that speederbike when I was a kid. And unfortunately, as I got older, all my Star Wars toys were lost or given away. And so this is the first Return of the Jedi speederbike I've actually picked up since becoming a collector. So I was very excited for this vintage collection release. I ordered 2 of them, so got them open, and let's take a look at them. I'll give you my thoughts. All right, so first off, let's take a look at the outer packaging, and right off the bat, I am impressed with this box. Very nice image there on the front, and then you got a little picture of what's included, as well as the carded figure inside. The shape of the box is reminiscent of the original vintage Kenner box. You got little images of different poses for the vehicle and the figure on all of the sides. Very nice. There's one. I like this one of him sitting on his bike. That's a pretty cool picture. And there's a look at the back of the box. And one thing else I wanted to talk about is the sturdiness of this box. They've used like double ply cardboard here for the flap. That is not moving at all. The box feels very sturdy. I don't think you're going to have a lot of people receiving these with any kind of damage, so that's a great thing. Alright, so I've opened up the packaging and removed the carded figure. I did order 2 of these sets so I could keep one of the figures on card. So let's take a look at the card back for this figure. You can see in the top left corner, it's got the Return of the Jedi 40th Anniversary logo. You can see the name on this one is Scout Trooper. More on that later. And a fantastic classic image of the trooper on his speeder bike. Note the color of the speeder bike there for later. And there's a look at the figure itself inside the bubble. Nice choice of the color green for the figure pill and name pill on this card back. And taking a quick look at the back, you can see this is VC number 273. And there's a look at Cassian Vel, the Scout Trooper, plus the next wave of figures that is coming. And overall, I'd say this is a fantastic card back, a classic one that we've been needing for completing the original 96. Now, I did also receive the retro collection version of the Scout Trooper this past week, so I thought I'd just bring this in for comparison. You can see on the retros, they are also including the Return of the Jedi 40th Anniversary logo, of course, And notice the name is Biker Scout. Now that is the proper vintage Kenner name of this figure. And there's the gigantic, ginormous retro sticker that is ridiculous. Unfortunately, the black paint on the mouthpiece area of the helmet is really botched on mine. I'm wondering if that's a pretty common issue. And there's a look at the rest of the figure, and you can see his pistol is oversized, which is consistent, I believe, with the vintage Kenner one. Same boring back of card as all retro collection figures, because God forbid they actually put images of the rest of the wave on the back. And here's a quick side-by-side look at the modern versus the retro style. As you can see, the retro one has a giant pistol compared to the modern, and the modern has a usable holster on the leg versus the retro is just molded in. And here you can see the difference in the names, as you have the revised name of Scout Trooper on the modern TVC and the classic Biker Scout name on the retro collection. All right, so let's take a look at the figure out of the packaging. This is a mostly reused mold. The biggest difference for this Scout Trooper is the helmet, and it is awesome. It is a massive improvement, and there is tons of articulation at the neck to move that helmet around in any position. And here's a look at the rest of the body. As I said, this is mostly reuse from the previous Scout Troopers we've gotten for the gaming greats part of TVC. Here is a look at the pistol in the holster. Now, this barely goes in that holster. It's not very stable, and I don't think there's anything Hasbro could have done about that. It's just a very short barrel on that pistol, and the holster could not be any bigger than it is. It would take up his entire lower leg, and you don't want that. And taking a look at the articulation, you have ball hinge joints at the shoulders, and my only issue with this is under his armpit, the hinge, of course, is white, and I just wish there was some way they could have effectively painted that hinge on that side as black. We've got a ball hinge joint at the elbow, and then we have a swivel joint at the mid forearm instead of at the wrist, unfortunately. We've got a crunch joint at the mid chest level, allowing for plenty of movement there, which I'm totally okay with on a trooper like this. And at the hips, we've got the ball hinge joint once again, which is a little bit of the older style versus the new kind of barbell style hips. Plenty of rotation at the knees with those ball hinge joints, and there's some swivel for the lower leg just below the knee, and then you've got new rocker ankles, which is nice. And I just want to note the paint apps at the bottom of the shoes. I do like how it runs off a little bit on the edge. It kind of makes it look like they've been walking in a little bit of mud without completely dirtying him up, because I like my initial releases of troopers to be clean. If they want to release another one that's really dirty, that's fine, but I wanted at least one to be clean, so I was happy with that. Now, with regard to his ability to hold his pistol properly, I tried to put his pistol in his left hand, and I'll explain why in a minute, but I noticed you can't really properly put it in his left hand because his fingers are all molded together, and it's a very small hole to grip that pistol around. So it's a little bit hard to show on camera, but you can see there, I can only get like his trigger. He's just got a trigger finger separated from the other three fingers, and so it just doesn't fit right. Now, if you switch over to the right hand, it's perfect. Because they separated those first two fingers from the other two. So they clearly made this to fit the pistol in the right hand only, and I just wish they had gone ahead and done the same thing for the other hand. This is a really minor thing, by the way. It's just a slight annoyance because of the way I wanted to position him on the speeder, which I'll show you guys in a minute. I mentioned the body is mostly reused from the gaming greats Scout Trooper, so let's bring in one of those. This is the Jedi Fallen Order one. And as you can see, the head on the previous version is just so small. I cannot unsee this anymore, but the bodies are virtually the same. You've got some little bit of paint app differences there with the pouches, I think. And aside from that, I think the addition of the rocker ankles is the only other major difference with the body between these two. And just for fun, let's bring in the Black Series version of the Scout Trooper. And right off the bat, the biggest difference you can see is the application of paint apps. This is a much dirtier Scout Trooper, especially with the feet, lower legs, and knees. There's also some minor weathering there on the chest plate. And I much prefer, like I said, the cleaner Scout Trooper, at least for an initial release. So I'm much happier with the paint on the Vintage Collection one. I just don't like how dirty the lower legs are compared to the rest of the figure on the Black Series one. And I'm sure they were probably trying to go for the fact that if he's riding on a speeder bike, his lower legs are probably going to get dirtier than the rest of his body. But I just prefer more of a consistent application across the whole figure. All right, so let's finally take a look at the speeder bike. And right off the bat, the first thing I want to talk about is the paint color choice for the bike. They've gone with this chocolate brown instead of the old school vintage Kenner color used on the bike, which is more of like I guess you would call it like a latte. So just a very light brown or maybe even a tan color. And I went back to look at the actual scene from the movie to see which is more screen accurate. And it's kind of funny. I think because of all the shadows created from the trees in the scene, a lot of times the bikes do appear to be this darker kind of chocolate brown. However, the majority of the time you see them, I think they appear closer to the old school vintage Kenner color, that latte / tan color. But there's also some moments where they almost appear to be a light gray, such as how it looks on the actual card back they've included in this set. So I would have preferred they went with the lighter brown / tan vintage Kenner color for this, since it appears that way the majority of the time in the scenes. And, you know, it's the Vintage Collection. This is supposed to be an homage to the vintage Kenner line in some ways. And so I thought that would have been a nice nod to the original toy to go with that same color. And it would have still been screen accurate. All right, so taking a look at the speeder bike design, this is an all new mold. The handlebars do not articulate, they just kind of snap in. So if you want to move them, you have to actually unsnap them out of that hole, which, you know, you're probably not going to want to do, might look bad. But that top raises there to see the engine, which is pretty nice. And let's see the speed flaps on the back. They do articulate individually, so that's good. Now, one thing to note back here, that little utility pouch on the back, it does snap off and on. And actually, when I took mine out of the box, it was like that at an angle, and I thought that was intentional, and I was like, why did they do that? And then I realized, no, it just was on crooked. So that does come off and back on. There's a little panel piece that was assembled there that does not do anything. And let me just take off this flight stand. It's very snug. It's a little bit difficult to remove. But looking at the underbelly, this little cannon here, it doesn't articulate, unfortunately. It just snaps in just like the handlebars. So that's a minor annoyance as well. And taking a look at the rest of the mold features, you do have some nice detailing on the undercarriage. I like the tubing, and it's got like a little bit of a softer plastic there, so it's kind of flexible, so that's nice. Now, the footrest pedal things here, they do not articulate either. They're kind of static, but they are flexible, so that's good. But let's bring back the flight stand, because I do like this thing a lot. It was molded to have 3 different heights you can set it at. So there's like your tallest height. And then the ball does fit very snug, but once you get in there, it allows you to, you know, rotate them in different directions, which is great. So I do like the flight stand. It does make for an awesome display. All right, next let's get our Scout Trooper on the speeder bike. It's a little bit tricky at first. You got to play with all the different points of articulation and keep going back and forth between the pedals and everything to get him on there. But you can eventually get him on there adequately. And so as you can see, I've got him on there pretty good. He's on both pedals. There are no pegs on the pedals, but I actually like that because it gives you a little more freedom, and it's got those lips to tuck the toes into, so I think it works fine. Now, I mentioned earlier that I did not like how the hinge at the shoulder is white on the underside, and that's because I wanted to pose him firing, and so that's not ideal. Also, I had a little bit of a trouble getting his butt down all the way on the seat. I may have to play with this some more, but it seemed a little bit tricky, but that's kind of a minor thing, and probably with some more effort, I will be able to get it closer to the seat. Now, I mentioned earlier that I bought 2 of these speeder bikes to keep one of the troopers carded, and so I brought in an extra endor Luke to put on the other one, and he's not articulated enough to sit on this thing, unfortunately. However, his poncho does do a nice job of covering that up, so if you just kind of display them from a side angle, you can't really tell. They doesn't sit on there well. And I've placed Luke's speeder on the medium height portion of the flight stand so that his elevation is staggered from the scout trooper. That way Luke's not blocking the scout trooper for the view of my display. So again, these flight stands work really well, and overall I'm very happy with the look of these speeder bikes. Again, I would have preferred they went with the lighter color brown for the bikes themselves, and some of the articulation on the bikes could have been better. But all in all, I think these look great for display. Very happy with them and highly recommend picking them up. Alright, so that's going to do it for this episode of Brett on Fett. Let me know in the comments if you ordered the speeder bike and scout trooper set for TVC and what you think of it. Thanks so much for watching this video. Thank you to my subscribers. Don't forget you can also follow me on Instagram and on Twitter. Take care, and we'll see you next time.